my colleagues from the International Labour Organization, ministers, representatives of the social partners in the region, the resident coordinator.
Isaac Dotson, President of the Caribbean Congress of Labour. Ladies and gentlemen, members of the media, good morning. It is indeed a pleasure and a special privilege to bring you greetings from the Secretary General of the Caribbean Community, Ambassador Urban LaRocque, who regrets his inability to be with us today, and also to deliver these brief remarks on behalf of the CARICOM Secretariat on the occasion of this 10th ILO meeting of Caribbean Ministers of Labour. This meeting is being held at a time when our region, like several other developing ones across the world, is grappling to find suitable and effective formulas to address our individual and collective development, especially in the current environment of economic and social challenge and increasing uncertainty. There is no doubt that as a region, we have made significant strides in a number of important areas of our development. Of particular concern, however, is the fact that the region has experienced sluggish growth as changed market conditions have resulted in increased competition and found us unprepared. This, along with graduation of several of our member states to high and middle income status, with the resulting reduced access to concessionary financing, has had, in many instances, deleterious effects on many of our member states, and traditional areas of our economies have come under severe threat. The region has also seen an upsurge in negative social outcomes, and in particular, high rates of youth unemployment, with females being at greater disadvantage, and also increasing youth violence and crime. In the recent past, we have engaged both within the region and globally in the development of frameworks for action intended to address our development. The UN 2030 Sustainable Agenda, along with the corresponding SDGs, presents us with a useful framework within which to engage in collective thinking and realignment of our perspectives to achieve that sometimes seemingly elusive goal of inclusive development. It is therefore appropriate that this meeting will focus in particular on the issue of decent work within the context of that agenda. This will facilitate more in-depth examination of the issues and highlight the imperative of an integrated approach which pays particular attention to the various axes of inequality which need to be addressed individually and also as transversal issues. Within the Caribbean community, CARICOM, the Conference of Heads of Government approved in July 2014 the first ever CARICOM Strategic Plan 2015 to 2019, which outlines measures for the strategic repositioning of the community and captures a development agenda for collective regional action. This plan is premised on a resilience model for socioeconomic progress, focusing in the main on the development of social, economic, environmental, and technological resilience. It is currently being implemented jointly by member states, the CARICOM Secretariat, and other regional institutions. An integral element of that strategic plan is the development of a 2030 regional human resource development strategy, which will look at the development of skills for 21st century economy and society. This strategy is scheduled to be considered for approval by the Council for Human and Social Development in March, in preparation for presentation to the Conference of Heads, which had mandated the development of that strategy. It has become increasingly clear that in the present circumstances, our conceptualization of resilience needs to shift from the classic paradigm and conversations of bouncing back, usually to a previous state after an external shock, to embrace the more recent thinking in development planning, in which resilience is premised on a dynamic process of bouncing forward. This conceptualization provides for the adaptation and constant reinvention needed to achieve the required levels of innovation in all facets of our development. And that is now the bedrock of future success. The discussions during the Forum on the Future of Work held yesterday brought this into sharp focus as we explored the likely parameters of the future of work and examined the implications for our region. The issue of increasing importance of sound social dialogue mechanisms in addressing that development at both national and regional levels was again underscored as the forum contemplated preparation of our region for the future of work. In this regard, the 26th meeting of the COSOD emphasized the importance of a regional tripartite social dialogue mechanism to the CARICOM single market and economy, and mandated the CARICOM Secretariat to work with regional stakeholders to structure the institutional arrangements for such a mechanism. A regional tripartite consultation was convened by the Secretariat in September of 2016 to make recommendations with regard to the structure of the regional social dialogue mechanism. This will be considered by a special session of the COSOD to be convened tomorrow. As we continue to work in the sessions today and tomorrow to address issues related to realizing decent work, with specific focus on areas such as the development of a skilled workforce and the role of labor management in improving productivity and competitiveness, I'm confident that we will be even further convinced of the imperative of ensuring the effectiveness of those agreed mechanisms for social dialogue. I wish to close these brief remarks by firstly extending congratulations to you, Mr. Ryder, on your re-election as ILO Director for a second term, and secondly, sincere appreciation to the International Labour Organization, and in particular, Ms. Claudia Conyarts and other members of the ILO Decent Work team and the Office for the Caribbean, for the excellent support which the team has afforded the region in several areas in pursuit of its sustainable development. It has been a distinct pleasure working with the team in Port of Spain. To the Government of Jamaica for the excellent arrangements put in place for this meeting and the cordial welcome and excellent support afforded participants, I say thank you very much. I thank you.
Welcome her, please, on a Thursday morning.
Of the ILO Caribbean Office, Ms. Claudia Conyarts, President of the Caribbean Congress of Labour, Mr. Wayne Ken, President of the Caribbean Employers Confederation, Mrs. Jennifer Isaacs-Dotson, Honorable colleague, Labour Ministers of the region, Director of Human Development and the CARICOM Secretariat, Ms. Myrna Bernard, Permanent Secretaries, Advisors, and other distinguished delegates, members of the Diplomatic Corps and Development Organizations, members of the media, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Welcome to the official opening of the 10th ILO meeting of Caribbean Ministers of Labour under the theme Realizing Decent Work under the 2030 Agenda. This year, the meeting will present an opportunity to have an exchange on the continuing challenge to promote a more inclusive and sustainable growth process with more and better jobs, as well as allow us as ministers to articulate and share our perspectives around the future of work, drawing from the national level dialogues that have occurred in the past year. I remind you of the context in which we are meeting and the objectives to be pursued over the next 2 days. Despite the progress we have made economically and socially, we are still challenged by the absence of sustainable strategies that can buffer our economies against economic vulnerability and fragility associated with small island states, natural disasters, the lack of economic diversification, and capacity for productive development. For this reason, Goal 8 of the SDGs, pertaining to the promotion of sustained, inclusive, and sustainable economic growth, full and productive employment, and decent work for all, is extremely relevant for the region. This goal, which is fully aligned with the Decent Work Agenda, cannot be achieved without a good balance of productive development, growth technology, employment, human capital, and economic and social policies. In other words, this objective contains a new vision that combines a renewed focus on the engines of growth, not just any growth, but the one with the three characteristics: sustained, inclusive, and sustainable, with specific attention on the traction that the growth process must have in labour markets by creating more and better jobs. The 10th ILO meeting of Caribbean Ministers of Labour has 4 objectives: to review progress being made by the countries and the regions since the last meeting of the Caribbean Ministers of Labour in 2015 in promoting sustained, inclusive and sustainable development with productive employment and decent work in line with Goal 8 of the SDGs. To consider the Future of Work initiative, which is an important part of the ILO's centenary initiative, and to discuss the main challenges and opportunities to advance towards a better future of work in the Caribbean. 3, to determine the mix of policies needed to promote growth that is fair, inclusive and sustainable, and to explore how the decent work agenda can be effectively integrated in the national articulations of the 2030 Sustainable Development Agendas. And 4, to identify and share good practices that can be replicated in addressing the challenges above, and to assess how the ILO can strengthen its support to member states and the region in developing responses. I look forward to our efforts in realizing these objectives and to devise practical strategies that will help us to achieve decent work for all in 2030. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. The Honourable Shahini Robinson. May I now invite Ms. Mona Bernard, the Director.
Those persons who need to be in the corner, please gather at the front lobby, and then we will come back here for that sharp 10:15 start. I hope we have another productive and successful day, and for the time being, I'm Mona Bernard.
Are you dressed for the 14th?
The meeting with the adoption and agenda and the establishment of the drafting committee. So,
Pure act of courtesy, but it is more than that. I am delighted, firstly, to be back in Jamaica. I'm delighted to be participating, in my case, in the third ministerial event of this type that I've been able to attend. And it's a real pleasure to see such a wonderful attendance here in the room. So many ministers and high officials who have devoted time and effort to being here today, along, of course, with the representatives of the regional organisations of workers and employers here in the Caribbean. I say this because I regard this meeting as one of extraordinary importance to the International Labour Organization. I have made it a central part of my management of the ILO to direct the organisation on the path of reform and continuous improvement, and at the heart of those processes is my conviction that the ILO will succeed, the ILO will pursue its mandate successfully if and only if it is listening very carefully to what its constituents are telling it, and is able to organise its workers to be responsive and useful to your needs. And so, as you said yesterday, Minister, when we met, there is a reason why we were born with 2 ears and only 1 mouth. And we're here to listen to you, and we're here to ensure that the ILO, your organisation, serves the purposes that you believe it must. And for that, I regard this meeting as being of fundamental importance. Colleagues, we had the good fortune yesterday, I think, to have a very lively, very wide-ranging discussion on the future of work in the Caribbean and around the world. Today we go into a slightly different mode. I think we can benefit from yesterday's discussion, helpful context. But I believe we have to approach our agenda today and tomorrow in a slightly different mode, as I say. We have a structured agenda, and we have tried to organise it in such a manner that we will be able to have very concrete discussions. And from an ILO perspective, those discussions will serve to direct our activities and to ensure that we are able optimally to serve you, the governments, workers and employers who are our political masters. Now, I say this knowing both the challenges which exist in the region, but the opportunities as well that we have to address those challenges. It is not the moment to go into detail about the substance of the challenges, But I do just want to draw attention to one phenomenon which around the world stands out above all others as a defining challenge of our time, and I don't think that the Caribbean region is an exception, and that is this extraordinary problem of youth unemployment. The figures are so powerful that sometimes they deafen us. If 1 in 4 young people in this region is unable to find a job opportunity, surely that requires us all to act, and to act with urgency and determination. The opportunities we have come, I think, from a very favourable national, regional and international environment. As we have heard, the 2030 Sustainable Development Agenda stands at the heart of our discussions and also at the heart of the ILO's activities at this moment. I'm very pleased that we have the UN Resident Coordinator with us today. Thank him for his presence and want him to know, and it's a message I give whenever I get the opportunity, that the ILO stands as a dedicated team player in the delivery of the Sustainable Development Agenda, not least because that agenda and the wisdom of the international community has put decent work at its heart. We have a very propitious international situation, environment, if we're capable of using it. Equally at the regional level, and I want to particularly welcome the participation of Director Bernard, we have, I think, a great deal of margin to strengthen and improve and to concretise our relationship and cooperation with CARICOM, and I want also to use this platform to say how determined we are to take all opportunities in that regard. And nationally, meeting as we do here in Jamaica, let me share with you how encouraging it was for me to meet the Prime Minister, Andrew Holness, yesterday. Prime Minister who personally presides over a super ministry dedicated to economic growth and job creation. A government which has put the decent work agenda firmly at the heart of its priorities and is doing so with a very firm commitment equally to the practice of social dialogue and inclusion in the processes of policy making. All of this is most encouraging, but we have to move from this encouraging environment to concrete action, and we have put before you, I think, a very important agenda which can help us to plot the way forward. We are going to look at how to put decent work at the centre of the national, regional and national policy agenda through social dialogue, and we have very important assets in that regard. We're going to present to you the recent work the ILO has done on non-standard forms of employment. We live at a time when the diversification of employment forms is seen by some as a major threat, an erosion of acquired rights at work, but by others as a sine qua non of competitiveness and innovation. How do we square that circle? We want to put the evidence of global experience before you to help us to address that issue. We are returning and presenting to you options in respect of the harmonisation of labour legislation in the CARICOM region. This is an issue which I think has been with you longer than I've been with you, that's for sure. It seems to be a perennial issue of discussion, but one where it seems to me at least, and you'll excuse my impertinence in saying this, some rather fundamental decisions have to be made about the way forward if we are not simply to have our wheels spin and us not to move forward as we would like. We will be addressing what we must do to protect some of the most vulnerable in the world of work, and I refer to the regional initiative of the elimination of child labour, to which so many governments in this region and in the Caribbean have signed up. We'll be looking at the key issues which came out so strongly in the discussions yesterday, of skill formation, of productivity improvements, and the issues of formalisation in a region where informal work is so prevalent. And finally, and I will close with this, but it's not the least important thing I want to say to you this morning. We have at the end of our agenda, and please look at the papers concerned, put before you a progress report on action taken on the conclusions that we adopted at the last CARICOM ministerial meeting in Nassau 2 years ago. I regard it as an essential part of the disciplines of our work together, precondition of the success that we can achieve, that we not only adopt conclusions at the end of our meeting tomorrow, but stand accountable to you for action taken to realise those conclusions. I think more and more everybody in public life is being held, and quite rightly so, accountable for the results that are achieved or are not achieved in public life. And I think that we cannot afford to do other than to be rigorous in our tracking of progress made, recognition of the gaps in achievement, and add to our determination as we move forward. So once more, thank you so much, ministers, colleagues, representatives of workers and employers, for having made the effort, the investment of time and effort to be here. Me and my colleagues from the ILO will be listening extremely careful to what you have to tell us, and rest assured that we will do everything within our power to accompany you on the road forward that we will be tracing today and tomorrow. I thank you.
Honourable Shahini Robinson, Minister, Ministry of Labour and Social Security of Jamaica, Caribbean Ministers with responsibility for labour.
Okay, running persons, all telephones on silent or off, preferably. Thank you. Roll tape. Tape rolling in 5, 4, 3, 2.
Okay, first off, Mr. Ryder, the Jamaican government has ratified the Domestic Workers Convention. What are the immediate tangible outputs that workers can look forward to?
First, I think it's extremely important and positive that Jamaica has ratified this very important convention, because for the first time this convention puts domestic household workers on the map. Too often we have the impression that these aren't workers like everybody else, and this convention basically provides them with the most fundamental rights at work: the right to have a contract, the right to have general labour law applied to them, the right to have working time arrangements like every other worker. So in a sense, it's bringing them out of the shadows into the full light of day and coverage of legislation. So the tangible effects are that these working people will now have the benefits of the protection of labour law like everybody else. Now, obviously, we have to work together to make sure the convention is fully applied, but I think this will bring immediate benefits to some of the workers in our labour markets who are probably most vulnerable and least paid attention to. I think it's great.
And secondly, what supporting role is the ILO playing in Jamaica? In Jamaica's commitment to empower women economically and implement with decent work agenda?
Yes, well, I think that the situation of women at work is in general a priority for the ILO. You know, after so many years, decades of trying to promote equality at work, the fact of the matter is that the gender pay gap between men and women around the world is still 23%. It's remarkable, and it has to be closed down. So we're working in practically all areas of our work. We put in the gender dimension. Now, in Jamaica, I think one thing we need is better data. It's very difficult to obtain gender disaggregated data about the situation of women at work. But then we have to focus in on areas that we know women are particularly overrepresented in. We've already talked about domestic work. I could mention informality. A large part of the Jamaican economy is informal, and we know that women are concentrated in that area. We are working with the government at the moment on a pilot basis to formalise the informal, and in so doing, I think it's one area where we can certainly help women to move up the labour market and basically have the same type of equal treatment that others would expect.
Okay, so we're here for the Caribbean Future of Work Forum. What really is the forum and why is it so important?
Well, our organisation, the International Labour Organisation, is 2 years away from its centenary. We're the oldest organisation in the international system. And we've decided to mark that centenary by a global Future of Work initiative. We're encouraging all of our member states around the world and the different sub-regions to have a reflection on what the future of work may look like. We live at a time of, often we talk about crisis in the world of work, so many people unable to find work, particularly our young people, but also of transformative change. There is massive change at work because of demography, because of technology, because of climate change, because of globalization. The forum here in Kingston is designed to try to understand these transformative drivers of change, to anticipate that change, and to work out what we need to do in the future to make sure that everybody, women and men, has a fair chance for a decent job. We're a long way away from that at the moment.
And finally, what role can the Caribbean Ministers of Labour meeting play, and what are your expectations?
I attach a great deal of importance to this meeting, which takes place every 2 years, and we're delighted that Minister Robin has invited us to come to Kingston on this occasion. It is the one time when the ILO is able to interact with the Labour Ministers of the region, to listen to them, to work out what the expectations they have of the ILO are and try to respond to them. We have a very interesting agenda. We're looking at CARICOM, we're looking at labour law harmonisation in the CARICOM region, we're looking at productivity issues, we're looking at how we can get the decent work agenda really central to national development strategies, and then go away with a clear determination, not just determination, clear ideas about how we're going to follow through with the action that's needed to make a reality of decent work opportunities for women and men of the region.
Thank you so much. That's it.
Thank you.
Okay, cut, cue. Okay, rolling in 5, 4, 3, back, still rolling.
Wait for one.
Karen?
Yes, sir. One other second. Yes.
Okay, once again, we're rolling in 5, 4, 3, 2.
Well, I think first and foremost, I wouldn't believe that it's the best way to start comparing Caribbean with Caribbean. I would say more, how do we look at the benchmarks that exist in global practice with international labor standards? And I think that Jamaica is really making a lot of progress. We know that they're going to pass a bill very soon on upgrading the legislation. So that is one element absolutely excellent. Of course, after that will come, you need to translate it into policy. You need to translate it, policy is basically the vision, and then you need to translate it into a plan of action. What are you going to do? How are you going to do it? When are you going to do it? Now, very much what the ILO's approach that we promote is that we should try less to try to be curative, if you want, but more on the prevention side. So you really create a culture through social dialogue that involves employers and the trade unions to really make sure that workers know and that workplaces invest in preventing accidents and diseases rather than curing them when they happen. Well, there are many groups of disadvantaged. You're asking how the ILO does that? How the ILO program? Okay. And how we work with Jamaica. Well, I'll relate it a little bit specifically to Jamaica. There's the social protection strategy. That's a big instrument. Jamaica has done great work in that area. And we have actually assisted in helping to look at what the calculations would be for really establishing a broad social protection floor. That is one area. Then there's the area of HIV and AIDS. Here we have worked on helping to develop a workplace policy with the constituents to ensure that there will be no discrimination of people who live with HIV and AIDS, but also that there is preventative work that goes on. And I think very importantly, an area that sometimes is not immediately connected with vulnerabilities, but it is very much the informal economy. That's the largest part of the workforce. And we have been doing some programs, in fact, in consultation with the government and with the social partners, to really look at how we can support the efforts the government is making in a broader formalization process. So that connects very much to the groups of development, because we want to come to a place where nobody is left behind. Equitable workplace. Well, I think that generally we can certainly say that overall the legal framework is in place. The protections are there. There are a number of areas around Convention 100, which is the Convention around equal remuneration, that could see some legal strengthening. But that is, Jamaica is not alone there. Convention